So some guy named Balaji is making a bet that Bitcoin is going to hit $1 million in 90 days. Okay, eventually it's gonna hit $1 million. I completely 100% believe that, but not in 90 days. This $1 million BTC bet, though, it's interesting to discuss because it comes from a place of deep distrust in the banking system, which we're all kind of skeptical of the banking system for good reason. Let's not forget what Satoshi put into the Genesis block. He was also a massive bank skeptic. And yes, the banks have well and truly screwed up this time, and they're taking the whole economy with them. And this Balaji dude believes that hyperinflation is coming for the dollar. I'm also a dollar skeptic long term. Remember, the dollar is being printed to infinity right now. The USA is $32 trillion in debt. And as Balaji points out, hyperinflation often happens quite quickly. Now, the shortest ever doubling of inflation for a currency was in Hungary in the 40s when the price doubled in 15 hours. But more often, we're looking around like 20 to 30 days for like, runaway crazy, like complete crash stuff, which is nuts. Although most cases of inflation play out over years, even the worst cases play out over years, many over decades. But this banking crisis is a damn big deal. The truth is that regulators were not surprised by the banking crisis. They've known at least since late last year that these banks are insolvent. And to be clear, we're talking about hundreds of banks here. Hundreds of banks. That's crazy, man. And as usual, the regulators knew about it. They did nothing. I don't even know what regulators do at this point. Anyway, I don't think the US dollar is going to collapse in such a dramatic overnight fashion. I think it is destined for the dustbin of history, but it's going to take a little longer to get there. I foresee more of a slow bleed over the next few decades. But if Bitcoin were to really hit $1 million in 90 days, which I do not believe that it will, then that would mean ultra chaos. We don't actually want that to happen. This would mean that there's been a complete collapse of the international financial system. The equity markets have collapsed. Interest rates would explode beyond what is even imaginable at this point. Potentially, we would see a block on selling your fiat currency for Bitcoin and gold. We have the potential for wars to break out. Just catastrophes, bad stuff. Plus, in a hyperinflation scenario like this, your Bitcoin probably gonna be worth about what it is today. It's just, the situation is not so much that Bitcoin went up, it's that fiat went down a lot really fast. At least it would act as a better wealth preservation tool, obviously, than the fading dollar in this scenario. People in Argentina and Lebanon and other places know very well that reality. But trust me, we do not want to see the global reserve currency go into complete meltdown basically overnight, which is, a 90-day time frame. It would be bad for everyone everywhere. And while I disagree with Balaji's prediction here, there is indeed a lot to be worried about when it comes to the global banking system right now, because there's a lot of crap going on and it's not good because it never gets better because central banks keep doing the same stuff. Dan Tapiero shared this chart showing that according to the Fed's own model that a recession is coming soon, as this indicator shows it's at the highest level in more than 30 freaking years. But then the money printer has started once again with the bank term funding program. The economy will once again be perverted in the dirtiest ways. The current financial events that we are seeing unfold globally are massively important. Live in interesting times, right? Well, this is one of the most unprecedented money printing events that have happened in a very long time, let's put it that way. Then today, we get this headline from the European Central Bank that they're gonna be working with top global central banks, that is the Federal Reserve, Bank of Japan, Central Bank of Canada, others, for a US dollar liquidity swap program. Now, as soon as this announcement came out, Bitcoin broke $28,000. This statement from the European Central Bank basically means that the dollar floodgates are opening up. This is essentially a backdoor way to bail out non-US banks to avoid more Credit Suisse-like situations. By the way, Credit Suisse, they've just been bought out by UBS for like just a few $1 billion. Complete collapse of that bank. Big fish eating small fish, but it was too big to fail, so they didn't let it fail. They sold it off to a bigger fish. Anyway, this ECB story is insane. You see, the Fed, they can't have all these foreign banks that are holding massive amounts of US treasuries and massive amounts of mortgage-backed securities, dumping all of those in a rush for any kind of liquidity into an illiquid market. It would crush things and put even greater losses on those hundreds of small US banks that are already deep in the shit. The Fed swap line, as it is being called, is basically a worldwide bailout. Here's how it works. The Fed gives dollars to the European Central Bank or the Bank of Japan, the other banks working with them, UK, Canada, etc., then those central banks allow smaller banks in their economies locally to give them those US treasuries, those mortgage-backed securities, and they'll basically buy them from the smaller banks at their face value, rather than the current market value. Same kind of situation as they're doing in the US, we're letting them take money versus it, except that this is happening overseas, so the Fed is backing up overseas banks. So this lets the banks be able to absorb any size of dollar outflows. QE Infinity is now QE Infinity Worldwide Tour. Oh yeah. This is going to balloon the Fed's balance sheet beyond comprehension and is of course an insane distortion of how markets should be working. The Fed is backstopping potentially tens of trillions of bonds and mortgage-backed securities held not just by struggling US banks, but by banks all across the world's major economies. This is good for Bitcoin. It is. It really is. Money printing is good for Bitcoin because when liquidity rises, well, prices do tend to go up as money comes in. Here's a chart from Raoul Pal showing Bitcoin versus global liquidity. Do you notice anything interesting here? It's pretty damn clear, isn't it? More liquidity, prices go up. Now, before I share some critical Bitcoin charts with you, if you want to trade these markets, the Bitcoin, the Ethereum, all the top altcoins, then you need to get yourself an account over on BYBIT. Join over 10 million traders trading on their futures markets, their great spot altcoin markets, as well as their wildly popular copy trading service. Use that link right down below here to start your account, and you will also be able to claim up to $30,000 in bonuses. First link in the description. Now let's talk Bitcoin charts. Bitcoin just put in its highest weekly close since June 2022, when of course Celsius and Three Arrows Capital blew up. That was a rough time, so it's pretty exciting to see a big move like this finally happening for Bitcoin. Critically, it has also closed the weekly candle above both the 200-week moving average and that critical area of resistance at $25,200, meaning that we now have a higher high and have broken the cycle of lower highs. That being said, I would not be shocked by a retest of $25,002 at some point, but take a moment to appreciate that we have just started a new trend, a bullish trend. How long that trend lasts, it's anyone's guess. But it has started. It is here. We are in the moment right now. Also worth keeping in mind as we close in on 30K that we may be facing this as our next major area of price resistance. Of course, the market's always obsessed with those big round numbers. We may not crush it on the first attempt to cross it once we clear 30K. Then I'm gonna start really getting excited about a run to where I think Bitcoin has a good chance of topping this year around $48,000. Going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. Also, keep in mind how these crypto cycles tend to work. We tend to see a lot of money flowing into Bitcoin first. Now, as altcoins have become more serious, we see more correlation here, but then we see it move into Ethereum. Then we see the altcoins going absolutely insane. And that works in smaller cycles. That works in bigger cycles. That's cycles within cycles, but generally we see these money flows are rotating around. Well, Bitcoin moving is really exciting. We all know the real money is always being made on altcoins. That's the 100Xers, baby. Okay, that's it. Sub now. See you next time.